Welcome to the Recruiter Startup Podcast. It is the last week of work, thank God, before we break up for a much needed Christmas break. It's been a hell of a year for all of us, but we're still standing. And if you're listening, you're still interested in moving your business along with all the members of our private community, the Lockdown Leadership Network. So we've got three different private communities for three different levels of businesses. And we have the Bounty, the Bridge, and the Dinghy. And what we aim to do is to bring like-minded people together to solve problems and to network. So it's unlike any other network out there in that it's completely free. So we choose who gets in and moderate the conversations essentially. And whereas other networks, you have to pay a membership to come in, you get some training services and you get a lot of extra stuff on that. So it's just a bit different on that. We keep the bar high and we have specific people that we want in our network. I'm always interested in anybody who is running their own recruitment business to reach out and have a chat. I would love to have you in there. So one of the things about running this Lockdown Leadership Network with Andy Hallett is we've had an unbelievable amount of amazing information, and to extract all of that out and to feed it back to the general public has been a real challenge. Eventually, we got around to doing a newsletter. So we got some key points that we're going to discuss, but as ever, I think it's much better to jump into stuff in a bit of an open form detail. So I called Andy up and got him back on the podcast. He has just bought a new house in South Africa, and he was out in front of his pool while I was here in windy, rainy south of England. Wasn't jealous at all. So we went through some key topics. Actually, so much so we had to break the episode into two parts. Some of the stuff we covered, work from home, what that meant for performance management, technology and innovation, the international marketplace, building your company for a sale, obviously podcast, media, mental health, commission structures, IR35, the list goes on and on and on. The big push towards selling retainers and how you can go about that and should you. So really, really great time discussing all this with Andy. And it's brought to you by some of our premium partners. That would be JSA, Kingsbridge, and Gateway HR. We'll have more offers coming out to the community in the shape of our newsletter. So that's going to go out later this week. We'll get the podcast out straight away. I hope you guys enjoy it. I'll try and get out the second part as well. If there's any of this that you'd like us to go into a bit more detail on, I'll try and dig out the information. If you'd like to become a member, just reach out. If you're a fan of the show, love to help you out in any way we can. And I hope that we're all in a great position to go after it after this nice break coming up. Have a great day. Welcome to the Lockdown Leadership. What would we call it? We call it this could be like our AGM here.
Yeah, it could well be. It could be we've made it, or we've nearly made it, or it's nearly 2021.
It's nearly 2021. Okay, so bit of a background to anybody. Andy, we set up a leadership network. I'm gonna say 6 months ago.
Yeah, sounds about right. So it was about 6 months ago, and I think it sort of grew very, very quickly. And we're sort of working out, as we've gone, on what it is, what it's going to become, where it's going to be. But it's about 6 months. Yeah, June sounds about right.
Yeah, I think what it is now is three very distinct groups of recruitment leaders and a group of recruitment leaders within the vendor community as well. So 4 different groups. Nobody pays to get access. And we choose who gets in, and we try and keep the bar really high. So the information and the conversations that are discussed are at the highest level. So everybody benefits from it. I suppose it's probably different from other networks in that it's not as socially driven as maybe they are. It's just it's become a very practical place where people come and share best tips and tricks and tech and what everybody's doing, and to just take a general temperature of making the right decisions out there. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it's fair, and I think those groups are all really, really different, and
Yeah.
I think what gets discussed is really, really different, and people's challenges, and I think the thing we found out pretty early was it's all about relevance. It's all about actually putting people together where those conversations are relevant. There's no point having someone who's a CEO of a 3,000 man company with someone who's just started their business. Their challenges are obviously completely different. Their drivers are completely different. So I think we found quite quickly that it's got to be, the conversation has to be relevant if people want to stick around and contribute.
So just to contextualize that for anybody, I suppose we've got the Bounty, the bridge, the Dinghy, and the Lighthouse. What type of conversations would we have had in the Bounty?
Typically, they're at the sort of very sort of strategic level, the macro level around the economy, around some of those big decisions around, when to. Probably this year as well, it was like when to take people out, what to do about offices, the whole return to work culture, and also as well strategically, where's the market going? In the bridge, it tended to be about a bit more practical focused, more about solutions, more about those CRMs, more about the tech side of things, more about using this time to really sort of get your operations and systems in play. And the Dinghy was pretty much around scrapping around, how to do things, the deals, how to get going, how to stay motivated, how to juggle 3 children and starting a recruitment business. So just very, very different challenges in each of the groups.
The Dinghy was a lot less corporate than the others, and that's where our mastermind program came from. So where we brought 7 startups from their initial stages the whole way through, doing all the amazing things. We'll have more information on that on another podcast.
What I liked about the mastermind was it was pretty much it was encapsulating what we've been through. So it is a blend of sort of, where I've seen companies grow, a blend of where we've started businesses ourselves this year. So it's those things around that, we would have loved to have had. In terms of someone there sort of on point taking you through that process, and actually having a peer group to be there with you going through that process as well. So yeah, I think the mastermind course was really, really good this year in terms of and actually the feedback, and not just the feedback, because everyone's nice about these things. Generally if you ask someone how do you feel, but actually the results that those people have achieved from it has been the thing that's given me the most cheer.
Yeah, winning business through technology, internet marketing, etc., building personal brand, podcasting, virtual assistants, setting correct goals. Your first hire was it was a 12-week program. That was just a taster of what we went through, and it was great. And we're gonna be taking an intake into that in the new year. So really excited about that. But I prepared something. Would you believe that? Yeah. So we've a lockdown.
Charlotte prepared something, yeah.
Charlotte did prepare it, actually. I tried to, but my old dyslexia kind of got in the way. So I don't know how I got through uni. So we did a newsletter of just a brief newsletter of some of the main topics that were discussed in the group. In all the groups, and I just thought we'd maybe go into some of the topics just in a bit more off the cuff fashion. So the first one here, things that were talked about, like it was really interesting. Like it was the work from home piece. So for many, it was the first time that they were put in that situation. Lockdown 1, how did that change in lockdown 2.0, and how is that ultimately shaped the future of work? What are your thoughts on that, just from dipping in and out of the different conversations and from your own advisory practice?
I think what we saw was very much different types of business dealt with it in different ways. If you are a business that is, a typical shop, you bring in grads, you train them really well, you push them, then those businesses didn't work, I feel, quite as well for the whole sort of work from home culture. And actually, what you saw at the end of lockdown, those businesses thrived once they got the ability to get those teams working together, to get those people all learning off of each other and pushing each other. I think some of what I'd probably call the sort of more, people who've been in it longer, those more experienced consultants probably were absolutely fine. They've been used to self-managing in a lot of ways and probably adapted to it a lot well. I think you'll see really a shift towards people having more of a choice, and I think also the employers will also have that more of a choice in terms of knowing what type of person works in their business and can they accommodate that in their business. So I think there was a lot of variation, no right answer, but on the whole, my gut feel is that productivity was severely impacted by the work from home regime.
Yeah, the expectations in the marketplace have changed. I think those who are adopting in London a 3 and 2, or in New York a 3 and 2 practice of 3 days at home and 2 in the office seem to be getting the most buy-in from recruiters out there. People still want a piece of the office, especially the young ones who are at earlier stages in their career or want to go down the management track. It's really important for them to get that bit of office time, but there's a definite shift in people wanting to live outside the city, come in for that one day, 2 days a week. So I'm definitely seeing that in terms of expectations out there. And a lot of scalable recruitment companies have really adopted that. Some have given up their offices altogether. I think Investigo have given up their office. I think they'll probably go into one, but they've been running fully remote, which is unbelievable for a business that size. And as far as I know, S3 were very, very cautious on getting people back into the office and pushed it remote as quickly as they could as well. Hayes, on the other hand, everybody back in the office as quick as possible. So it's even among the majors, there seemed to be massive switches of the mid-tier players. It was all over the place, and for the most part, there's a lot of variety out there, which surprised me. Normally, you get a bit of groupthink, but then I think there is also the grad houses, the KPI houses, for a better word. Get them in the office. Let's get productivity up. Let's make it happen, and let's turn graduates into high performers. They absolutely wanted them back in the office, and rightly so, because that's where their model is best suited. So it was an interesting one. It shaped everything else, though. So if your model's changing, it changes the type of people you can hire. You alluded to that, but it also changes the way that we can manage people. So the second discussion point was performance management. And how can we now use KPIs as a tool for good rather than a stick for not doing the work? What's your thoughts on that? Like, because I know.
See, I've always had a few KPIs are mislabeled. Okay, your key performance indicators are basically the revenue you bring in. Okay, and probably some of the sales pipeline in terms of interviews and jobs that you do. Everything else that people talk about KPIs are just activities. So the amount of phone calls you make, the amount of product you send out, email, they're activities. Your key performance indicators are the things that effectively go up to what is a key performance indicator for the business. I think you'll see a trend for people managing on results, not on inputs. But it's recruitment. Ultimately, inputs equal results.
Yeah, and so I don't know about that, if I'm honest. And I think in an ideal world that would be the case. But what I found is a lot of recruitment owners, because obviously I get the people who are looking for a job. They're like, hey, we've gone remote. The market's tight. My boss is breaking my balls. They've upped the KPIs. They're making sure that we're at it to a point where we're all losing motivation. So I think the recruitment industry has always had a problem with trust. And now we're in this position where how do we manage through trust? How can we use this data to help these people get better as opposed to making them feel demotivated? One of the suggestions in the group was a buddy system. So they would get like a senior con and a con, or a principal con and senior con, however they wanted to work it, but they would buddy them up 2 and 3s, and they would hold them. They would try and keep themselves motivated and accountable as a group. So they took ownership over their own work, as opposed to I say you should do this and you should do it because I said so. So I thought that was interesting. And there's people I've listened to in the last while who've opened their mind to so much that were never interested, never changing. And that's what's fascinating about this time and these conversations. So look, the next thing leads to, if we're working from home more and we need the performance to be spot on, are we setting our people up for success with the technology and innovative products that they're using? Look, I'm guilty of having more tech and advisors than NASA at the moment for my scale business. And there's definitely, every time you implement a new tool and technology, it's hard for the recruiters to get that into their process because they've always ran a specific process. What's your thoughts on this world? Like, this is the world that we talk about most. Where do we start, Andy, on the tech that's out there that's enabled this switch?
There's some great tech out there. Obviously, it's not just recruitment. It's the general move to cloud has prompted the ability for people to deploy tech quickly, to work remotely in distributed ways. So it's a global mega trend as opposed to just a recruitment piece. My thing about recruitment technology is it does make it easier for consultants. That said, the job of a 360 consultant has got a lot more sophisticated over the years than when I joined the industry 40 years ago. So actually it does make it simpler. The challenge is when you make the job simpler, how you get that back as a return. I used to joke, what would happen, people used to come in and do these pitch and say, look, we can do this bit of technology will save your consultants 10 hours a week. What would they do with that ability to save 10 hours a week? And generally my view is they get better at table tennis, because people generally, unless you actually take that and say, right, okay, well now your target's actually up effectively 10 hours because we've given you this time back, what more can you achieve? So yeah, you can give people the best systems in the world, but if you're not managing them, if you're not actually making sure that the tech is giving them the advantage, then you're just on a level playing field with everyone else.
Yeah. So my head is in this subject at the moment, and it has been for the last little while. To get the proper use out of these tools is very hard, and I've almost got to a point. I suppose I'll talk about the evolution of how we've done it. You introduced me to Richard Gibbard, who helped knit together some of the tech that we had.
Richard's up there with one of the finds of the pandemic. He's up there with the vaccine in terms of actually a great thing that we didn't have at the start of this.
Yeah, big time. And it was an interesting journey. At the start, firstly, as I was watching the data, I was watching. We have a principal recruiter, and I was watching exactly what she was doing, how she was using it, and then I could see a gap. So then I moved somebody in to do the sales side, and then I overloaded him with technology, and then I went, oh no, he's not able to do that. So how can I make, a large part of this was, how can I make her super efficient at account management, and how can I get him just focused on winning clients? And by winning clients, I mean following up on product to market and dealing with the inbound leads that come from the stuff that goes out there. And that meant I had to put a third person into the process to knit it all together. And now I'm at a point now where the Rich is getting get me to use Zapier to make all the different tools talk to each other. So a lot of it happens in an automated fashion. So some of the stuff we're using is we're using Lemlist for our email system, and that then speaks to Vincere, our CRM. And then for data, we've just purchased Seamless AI after an extensive review of what's out there, and also Recruiterly. So that gives us the contact numbers to be able to follow up on. But how do we know the vacancies? Well, then we have Sourcebreaker to work out where the vacancies are within our niche. So I'm going through all of this here, and John, who works for me, he was ready to walk in front of traffic every time I give him a new tool. So I had to take it all away from him and just say, hey, just go sell. All of this is so you're free to sell. And we've just been on a run this last 2 weeks, client after client after client. And it's a great feeling when all the tech works together. But I couldn't have done it if I didn't have Rich to knit it together and Charlotte to administer it, and then train Andrea how to administer it. It's not just as simple as buying a load of tools, I don't think.
No, and I really admire your single-handed obsession that you're not going to do anything. I'm not going to touch it.
Nothing.
This
has to be independent of me.
I want to get up on a Monday, literally just chat to people on a podcast and drink on a Friday afternoon. I like your ambition around this.
That's why you went into business with me. We share similar goals. So that's just a taste of innovation. There's so much unbelievable tools out there, and our aim, to be clear, is we're going to partner with more and more vendors to bring the best technology to market. And how do we know it's the best? Well, we get the 300 odd companies we get a large selection of people within that we trust to test it out, and then we know that this is the best. And I'm really confident now. Like, I didn't know anything about any recruitment tech. I know you have more of a background, but now I feel like, now that I'm living it in these groups all the time and I'm testing it out, and I'm really excited about it. How do you think that works for the future of recruitment? Is like, will the recruitment, like, how will that change the way we scale our companies?
Well, what I think you'll see is a move towards marketing as opposed to sales. You've seen it since I joined the industry 50 years ago. Then it was very, very different. You'd phone up a hiring manager. They couldn't go online. They didn't really have access to job boards. They didn't have their own databases. And you probably had about 3 people on your database that could do the job. So they would pick one of those 3 people. And if you didn't have 3 people on your database, you'd convince them to take a grad. So that was pretty much what we did. Now, there's hundreds of thousands of people available, in niches, and the skill is around filtering. There are people to do all the roles out there. You've just got to bring them together, and actually tech is incredibly good. What you'll see is that data will be key. People who have good quality data and run good quality processes over the top. It's basically just moving good recruitment practice from an analog to a digital world. But I think recruitment in its use of technology, and indeed some of the rep tech out there, is 5-10 years behind the industry or other industries. And if recruitment were to look at basic B2C, basic B2B marketing, I think it could learn a lot. I think we've learned a lot this year from some of the SaaS companies we've been dealing with. How we talk about wanting to build recurring revenues, for example, that aren't just contract books, basically. So those are things that we've sort of learned from outside of recruitment.
Yeah, I would have always said, like, we're so far behind other industries, but the more I'm speaking to innovative recruitment firms, I feel like there's a lot of smart recruitment leaders out there that are that are really trying to push the boundaries on this. Um, and I don't want people to think that that means they don't believe recruiters should be on the phone and doing their job. I think a lot of them are thinking recruiters should be on the phone doing their job in the best possible way to influence, and the rest of the business and the machine and the tech facilitates that. And it probably just means we don't need as many heads in an office as we once did.
Yeah, I think you were saying about this, how this affects scale. Well, I think you can automate a number of things, and you can do things better, and you won't necessarily need humans to be well trained to do that. It might also mean that it's a different type of profile you start to take on. It's people who are analytical, data driven, as opposed to people who are just amazing salespeople potentially. Like, you're always going to have room for all of those in the organization, but maybe you're going to see the blend change. I think what you might also see is the roles being broken down and moving more to that sort of model where people go and look. You've got your rainmakers out there bringing in the business, and you've got your whole sort of systems that really sort of drive those delivery strategies as well.
So one of the things I found interesting during this process in my own business is that you can automate so much of the sales side of the process that the rainmaker, whilst they are important, they're probably not as important as the account manager that knows the client, that knows the candidate, that can match them together, that can keep everything going. It's almost like the account manager should run the BD person, or at least that's the way that I'm going in our world, because so much the BD can be done from marketing, from automation. And that wasn't the case 10 years ago. So we always talked about like, oh, that's a glorified resourcer, but I believe it's the opposite now, and I'll be steering into that direction.